And good morning and welcome to another Tuesday morning where you will find the Kitchings Table here giving you information and knowledge, hopefully some wisdom and hopefully giving you something to think about. I'm Earl Kitchings, the host of the show, and joining me is co-host Ronline Cannady, and we'd like to thank her for taking the time out to join us here this morning. Good morning, Ronline.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me again.
Well, it's always my pleasure to have you. We'd like to also thank the staff and management of Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM, WBISLP, for allowing us to bring you our show. You can find us on other platforms such as YouTube, Facebook Live, Roku, and GPAC 23. So we're going to delve right into our subject matter today because that she is on fire about the topic for today, and I don't want to hold her fire from burning. So we're going to jump in because today we're talking about one of the critical things, at least, that is happening in our school systems in our states as it relates to our school system, especially down here in Florida, and that is the voucher situation for schools. So before I go into letting Ron Lee share with you what she has, let me just give you some insight and information and definitions of the three facets of this whole school choice voucher charter school situation, just so we all understand, because I know it's been out there for a while and you hear the word, but not necessarily always understanding the meaning or the context of it. So I'm going to do the three parts of this whole school choice thing, starting with what the definition of school choice is. And by definition, the mission of school quality public and private educational choice programs by providing information and assistance to promote successful outcomes for students, families, institutions, and communities. Private and public educational choice programs, school choice. Then we have the vouchers. School vouchers give parents the freedom to choose a private school for their children using all or part of the public funding set aside for their child's education. Under such a program, funds typically spent by a school district would be allocated to a participating family in the form of a voucher to pay partial or full tuition for their child's private school, both religious and non-religious options. Vouchers take scarce funding from students in public schools and give those resources to unaccountable private schools. That comment is from the NEA. And then finally, charter school definition is they are public schools that receive tax dollars but operate independently of school districts. And they are created to improve public education and offer parents more choices. So we go back to choices, school choice, and then charter school is a part of that. Charter schools can be opened by, I want you to really, really hear this part, because this is probably what a lot of the, I guess, for a lack of words, anxiety is about the voucher and charter schools and school choice. But charter schools can be opened by individuals, companies, underlying companies, or public institutions. Operators sign contracts with local school districts that detail the school's plans and the district's authority to ensure student welfare. These contracts, these contracts are called charters. Now, when we talk about funding, over $600 billion in federal, state, and local funds go to K through 12 public education each year. $600 billion in the United States go to our public schools every year. So that's a $600 billion pie that folks are wanting to slice up so that they can send the money to these charter schools who's have parents who want choices and want to use vouchers in order to offset some of the costs. Now, the reason why I spoke about who can open a charter school. And when I say companies, there are some major companies that are out here in the world who are behind charter schools and their building and their participation in the school system. So, uh, private tutors, publishing companies, for profit universities, uh, this is an industry. This has now become an industry. Education has now become an industry. Once upon a time, it was just a entity involved with our cities and our schools. But now it exceeds this industry $270 billion in revenue. So a public school is not generating revenue. Public schools are nonprofits and they're not generating revenue. And when I read you the definition of charter schools, nowhere in what I read, unless you're going to put them under a company, did it say nonprofits. The largest for profit education company in the world, the largest for profit education company in the world is the TAL Education, TAL, with a revenue of 4.5 billion and over 30 million students. This company is based out of China. The top two companies who are for profit education companies in the world, the top two companies are based out of China. And in the top 10, four companies overall are based out of China. I found three that were located here in the United States, one in Cincinnati called Bright Horizons, two in Herndon, Virginia, ironically, one called K-12, and the other called Strategic Education. These companies generate revenue above 1.5 billion, 1.1 to 1.5 billion dollars. That's what they generate in revenue, and their net income anywhere from 81 million to 201 million, depending on which organization or business you're in. But public or education, not public education, but education has become a major, major business. Ronline, what did you got to say about that?
Listen, you've always talked to us about follow the money. And what larger industry to deal with is the educational system because every child is ordered to go to school. So with the millions of children that are going to school, why not, if you're that person, capitalize on the children? So this is what's happening here. So for the state of Florida, you can check out Family Endowment Scholarship Programs
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
Educational Opportunity Voucher. For the
Mm-hmm.
state of North Carolina, you can check out Opportunity Scholarships. Now, I don't think people really understand. So let me just bring it back to you, Earl, so you can just really tell people where this money is coming from. This money is not coming from donors and things like that, like people think when they think about private school. This money is coming from places like um, the SNAP program, the program that's set aside to feed children, the program that's set aside to make sure that these children have housing, the programs that are set aside to make sure that the families eat. So you're dealing with their shelter now. These are all basic needs that we need. So you're dealing with their shelter, you're dealing with their eating. Their nutrition, food and nutrition. This is one of the things that Michelle Obama was fighting to make sure that the school lunches were nutritious enough so that the children can learn, adequately. And we only have a small window. And with you being an educator, in your for your industry as an industry as well, for you to be that person that sat in the classrooms and dealt with your students, what happens when your children are not getting the adequate amount of nutrition into their bodies so that they can learn? What happens to their learning?
Well, they're not totally prepared physically, internally to deal with the day. But you know what, Ronline? One of the things that used to always disappoint me to some respect was children who came to school sometimes, there was free lunch breakfast. That was there. But a lot of the kids come to school with snacks and soft drinks, and some of them eating snacks and drinking soft drinks before they even get to school because they stopped at the convenience store and walked in there and got the snacks. So it kind of offsets the fact that, well, you can go in here and get you a good breakfast, but your palate is what your palate is. So when we talk about nourishment, and it's always been said that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, because basically when you think about the fuel that comes out of having breakfast to get your engine started in the morning, it fuels your brain, it stimulates your brain, it awakens those nerves that cause you to think, cause you to comprehend. And sometimes the wrong content of food can push that down so that you don't get all that you want. And then, of course, those snacks and drinks, I mean, it makes your children a little bit more excitable, or as they say, uh, they're all amped up because they got all that sugar in their body. So it's important that the the, the meal is what it needs to be in the morning.
Okay. And so you're exactly right about that. And when you brought up about the school lunch programs, the breakfast and lunch. So right now, because we are coming out of Pitt County, um, our broadcast is coming from there today. So I want to talk about Pitt County for a moment. All right. So right now, before they got into a good start of the school year, they had to deal with the now they said as of December, the school debt, just dealing with lunch programs and breakfast programs alone, has now reached over $1 million that needs to be paid. Okay. And they're serving like 35,000 less lunches and breakfast now because of that school debt that needs to be repaid. So here we are, as you said, the $1 billion industry for children is being attacked. Um, and now they can't get the food and nutrition that they need. So for those that are not able to go to the convenience store, get these sugary snacks and things like that, they're coming to school with nothing. Okay. There was an initiative that I was a part of years ago wherein we made sure that before the children left school for the day, for those that did not have electricity in their homes to be able to warm up food or whatever, we sent them home with a school bag. And when I talk about a school bag, I'm talking about a backpack, with fruit, vegetables, and things like that that they can eat throughout the weekend so that they will not be hungry coming back to school until they are able to get that free lunch program, or to be able to eat again, should I say, at school for breakfast and for lunch. All right. So now, they're being attacked on that end. They don't have enough money. The parents don't have enough money or income coming in to even keep a roof over their heads. So they're either being filtered out to foster care or someone else's care to be able to take care of them, and so that they can get by through that school year. So we're talking about 180 days. And based on 180 days, the school lunch program just out of Pitt County alone comes up to $675 that they have to have each to operate throughout that school year just for lunch and just for breakfast. So think about that. If you have three children going to school in that and that's participating in that program, or can't be a part of that program because they're, just going from $13 an hour to $15 an hour knocks them out of the box of being able to qualify. So, with that being said, Earl, with this whole war, and actually that's what it feels like to me, a whole war that's going on in the educational program to keep these children at bay, to keep them from learning. So it reminds me of the movie From the Cradle to the Grave. So you're rocking your child to sleep or to get them calm or whatever, you're kissing them good night and you're wishing all of these great things over their life, only to find out that there's a jail cell at the end of the day waiting for them, because if they're hungry, they're going to steal. They're going to find a way to eat. And if they don't have anyone at all to care for them, then what? Where are they? And then we have these industries, these companies that are filtering in on, oh, we know how to make some money very quickly off of the children. And now what? So I thank you for bringing this to our attention today, Earl. And the people that we've reached out to, like the Stacy Pools, over at the Northeast Education Institute that he has going on in Jacksonville, Florida. The Maricel Peterkins here in Jacksonville that was running her daycare for years and dealing with hungry students that's coming through her doors, need to feed them first and foremost so that they can be able to be in that process of learning. So people like them, first year educator Joy Brown in Pitt County Schools, all of those people who are looking at the day-to-day process and wondering like, oh my goodness, what can we do? And I'm thankful that there's an initiative going on out in Pitt County Schools to wherein they're trying to get these student debts paid off so that the children can participate in the program once again to be able to get their lunches. But what about those people who don't qualify to begin with? So to have a person to say, oh, I know I have enough income coming into the household, but I don't want to pay for my child's education. So I'm going to put them into this private school, use these private vouchers, and then the child that needs, just like the people that's living out there in the rural areas, these people that needs to be educated can't be educated because now there is no money left. What do you got to say about that, Earl?
Well, there's a cycle that continues to go around and around as it relates to the assistance and help dollars that are needed to help those families who are on the lower end of our society. And because it's always interesting that people who have the most tend to not want to give, but want to make more. And I was just thinking, when we talk about school vouchers and the fact that school vouchers, where you're trying to divert money from public schools to create vouchers for private schools, I think about the millionaires and billionaires who have the resources to support the types of school that some of their politicians that they favor are out here doing. And it's just one of those things where, as they say in the world of finance or banking, let someone else finance your project. Don't use your money. Let someone else use someone else's money. And when we talk about the fact that we're talking about a voucher system, not every state in the United States has a voucher system. There are really about 15 to 16 states that have some type of voucher assistance program. And, that's a small amount based on the fact that we have 50 states. And one of the places that they have a program is in Puerto Rico. So when we talk about utilizing these dollars, and when you want to take dollars from public schools and divert them into private schools, Private schools have always depended on donated funds to support them and give them what they need. But if you can find a way, which you have politicians, we had a former president who hired a former secretary of education who were wanting to just divert dollars from public schools into private schools. And it has become an issue because now when you want to take, so you were getting 5%, now you want to get 10%. And you just keep chipping away until you get all the money that you want to. And in the United States, there are 90,000 plus public schools and 47 plus million students who attend these schools. And when we talk about the voucher programs, let me just read something I found on the internet that in 2017, former President Trump and former Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos championed a plan to provide federal funding for private school voucher systems nationwide, which would funnel millions of taxpayer dollars out of public schools and into unaccountable private schools. This was something they were wanting to call school reform, saying that it would help those low income students who are basically stuck in failing schools to do better. And they wanted to uh, take more than 13% of the funding that is allowed for schools, public schools throughout the country, and divert it into these private school vouchers. And when you have a governor, such as we have here in the state of Florida, who wants to get a little bit more than that, when he has constituents who are seeking more than that, and as you and I discussed, a person who has an income doesn't necessarily need a voucher to send their child to school. But if it means you're not going to take any more money out of my pocket, then I'm all for trying to get a voucher so my child, who can well afford to go to a private school, can go to that private school. There are several outstanding public schools throughout the country that are doing well. And I think if we would do a better job as a nation of providing the income for teachers and the necessary upgrades and infrastructure and things of that nature in our public school system, the public school system would be brought up to standard, and we wouldn't have to worry about going to private schools. And not to knock a private school, but if you choose and want your child to go that route, all well and good. But I think the issue is when you're trying to take monies from the public sector to divert it into the private sector, that's when it becomes an issue. And when you take public dollars away from public schools to give it to private schools, a child who might need that voucher has lost out because that voucher money or the monies or the funds for that have been diverted and put somewhere else. So we're in a situation, and again, we don't have that many voucher related school districts in our states. Like I said, it's about 16 of them, and we have to be mindful of that. The average voucher in the state of Florida is about $7,000 per student. It's about $7,500 per student. So you do the math when you've got a few thousand students, and like in the state of Florida, we have 2.8 million students in the state of Florida at a cost of a voucher of $7,500. That's quite a chunk of funding, and we just want to be mindful of how folks are doing this, because as we look at some of the things that are going on, the representation of some of these school boards for these states don't represent the makeup of the states that they live in. I mean, you've got a board that none of the people look like, like you or I, Ronline, and it does make a difference. So we have to be careful and mindful, and we have to bring these things to the forefront and put them out there, because if we are not aware and we are blind and no one speaks up, The next thing you know, instead of 10% or 13%, it jumps to 25%. And that is a large amount to be taking out of our public schools, where children who don't have the resources need those funds to help their schools become better.
And you're absolutely right. And this also stems down to in the public school sector, job losses. Um, Losing teachers right now is so critical. So to lose teachers who would now have lost their benefits, everything that they've worked hard for, to have
Mm-hmm.
scram to go to find employment um, in other schools. And I guess in this case, since the private schools are shooting up everywhere, they'll end up there. So now the quality of education is even less because that talent had to move on in order to sustain their way of life. So all of this is critical on so many levels. This thing really goes long, deep, wide,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and it stems, we only get a small window to really take advantage of our child's brain and what they're learning. So the ages from 5 to 7, 5 to 9 are very critical in what they're in that teaching process. So you have to get it. I have a student right now that I'm following. She went from third grade to fourth grade. Her in her first through third grade year, she told me that she was making straight A's, even helping her special needs brother. Now that she's gotten to the fourth grade, they're learning more about the zeros that's being added to the one. And just going through that transition, they're now being taught about, I think, trigonometry, geometry, and things like that are being introduced to them on a larger scale than what it was introduced to them before getting to grade 4. So if she's bumming out at the fourth grade level, then that tells me about the studies that have been taking place on a child's brain. So we have to make sure that they're getting the correct nutrition. Those snacks, those sugary snacks that you were talking about earlier, we don't introduce them to great eating habits today. And that was one of the things that I learned about the Michelle Obama's initiative for the lunch program, was because she took her daughter to the doctor and he became concerned about her growth and development. So at an early age, before you get to age 10, if you don't have fundamentals in place for your child's nutrition and learning, those things go hand in hand. And,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to what we were talking about before. You got to have books in your home. So when a child comes home, because they're not coming home with books anymore, when a child comes home, you need to be, just like you started out putting them to sleep by reading a book to them when they were infants or whatever, that cycle has to keep going. And you have to introduce to them good information so that they can have those building blocks. Their attention span can be longer, So all of these problems that are happening in school where the children are concerned, their learning disabilities are popping up everywhere. Every time they go to the doctor, their attention span and all of the other, what is ADHD and all of the other things that go along with that, Earl. My heart goes out to each student, because again, this is a war on students. In order for them to not be the adults that they should have been, productive adults, that they should have been, be able to participate in economy and making things grow and things like that, to be able to have the substantial income needed in order to keep a roof over their own heads and to be able to have a producing family that can come into learning how to make a 6-figure income. And it goes back to this when you were talking about going to the better schools and things like that. So we know that if you go through the better schools, you get better SATs, you get better um, whatever other um, high scores to get the LSATs, once they get ready to go to law school or whatever the case may be. So those children, their way is already paved for them. All they have to do with their parents get out there on the golf course and say, hey, my child will be graduating in May, June, or whatever, and we're looking for him, for employment or whatever. The next thing that's being said, oh, we have a place for him at or I'll talk to, they already have a job waiting for them at a high level. None of these entry level jobs that's going to pay you 13, 14, $15 an hour. No, we're talking about already coming fresh out of wherever they're graduating from, six-figure incomes. What do you have to say about that, Earl?
Well, it's going to always be those type of situations and those type of things going on. We must, as adults and parents, seek out the best opportunities that we can for children to learn. And granted, those best opportunities might not always lie in public schools, which we've seen that for many, many years, even since I was in school, that we had private schools, Catholic high schools or Catholic schools, from one perspective, that was felt that the children going there got a better education. Well, part of that has to do with, you know, smaller numbers, a little bit more structure. And, you ask any teacher in a public school where they're on that cusp of uh, the CD grade, if you ask them what would help make one of the biggest differences in children learning, one of the first things they will tell you is discipline. When there's no or little discipline in the classroom, it takes so much away from a teacher having to teach. And that is one of the things that we have to be mindful of, that it's hard to get a good flow of knowledge and information through teaching when a teacher has to deal with discipline issues. And that is such a distraction, and that is such a cause to get everyone off track. When we have that in the schools, when we have that structure, because if you go to a private school, parents who send their children to a private school, they already know that the structure and the discipline are there. And if you don't abide by that structure and that discipline, they're going to put you out, and you will have to find some other means of getting your child educated. It should just be something where parents make sure or do the best they can to ensure that their children have some discipline and structure in their lives. But when it's not there, a lot of parents expect the schools to feed them, teach them, burp them, baby them, and everything else in the course of a day, where children come to school for about 6 or 7 hours. That's not their job to do the extra. So we have to just stay mindful of where we are, and there will be situations where some people will have distinct advantages. Life is like that. Life is not always fair, but at the same time, we have to prepare the students as best we can in order to be ready to deal with the challenges of life and work and all the things involved with uh, being a responsible and accountable adult as you get older. So there's a lot of work to do. However, going back to this situation of siphoning off monies uh, And before I go any further with that comment, I would just like to thank everyone for joining us here on the Kitchings Table, here on Awesome Radio, 106.9 WBISLP. We thank you for joining us here, and we hope that you find what we're sharing with you of some information and importance, and brings you some insight. But going back to that, I like to just read a comment that the NEA, the National Education Association, put out when Betsy DeVos was the Secretary of Education, and their comment was, DeVos should not be allowed to choke public schools and the students they serve by siphoning, or they put in parentheses, or stealing money away and shipping it to private and religious K through 12 schools. Her voucher proposal reflects profit chasing, out of touch, and uninformed thinking. In an attempt to appeal to communities of color, she fell flat in citing the nation's historically Black colleges as the real pioneers in the fight for school choice, seemingly unaware of the racist policies that prevented Black students out of their colleges and universities. So when you read something like that, and we talk about siphoning slash, i.e., stealing, and profit chasing, when we're, and I'm not just talking about schools somewhere between K through 12. We're talking about colleges and universities, because a lot of colleges and universities have popped up on the scene that are profit making institutions. Most of your state colleges and most of your private colleges who fit under that umbrella are nonprofit. They are not out seeking to make money. But when you have colleges and universities who are profit driven, and that's what they're doing, then you might get what you're looking for out of it. But it has a long-term effect when we're talking about taking money from other places to fund these type of schools. And a nonprofit is not a profit-making entity. That's why they call it a nonprofit. It's not seeking profit. So that's what most of our public schools are, our public colleges and universities, and the private colleges and universities who come up under that umbrella. So we have to just continue to be mindful of who's out here doing what and how this money is being brought in and distributed, because the people who are about making the money, as I indicated earlier, because education has now become a big business, they're just looking to do that. They're just looking to line pockets and increase their bottom line, and is not totally fair when you take monies from public schools who are in need, because public school money comes from taxes. That's where it comes from. Taxes are where public schools in our states and cities get their resources from in order to operate. So when you take that money away from them, where are we going to replace it? Where does a replacement come from? Uh, and like the private schools that are utilizing donations, people giving back, people putting trust in these schools, people who just have the income to build and fund these schools. Well, when you think about all the people who have all this income, and then when you talk about the fact that their tax bracket, when you minimize how much they pay in taxes, and when you have a president wanting to make sure that class of people don't have to pay a lot of taxes, but yet they want to benefit from public dollars for sending their children to school. It's a very complex situation that we're dealing with. And as we look at the schools and the states that have the voucher programs, and like I said, it's about 16 of them, and some of them have more. They're doing more than others. Like Wisconsin has 4 programs, Ohio has 5 programs. Other states basically just have one, type of scholarship program, i.e., vouchers for their state. So, but I think here in Florida, we are mindful because we have a governor that continues to always be in the forefront of doing things that seem to be somewhat controversial.
Mhm. So I was reading what you had provided about the Florida leads nation in the school vouchers, including education savings accounts fueled by tax credit scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
In this mechanism, a wealthy company can skip paying state taxes by funding a school voucher program. Would you like to elaborate on that? Dealing with Step Up for students right now,
Well,
their investigation.
well, again, going back to the fact that the education industry has become a business. So, you have a company that's looking to maybe not pay as much tax as they need to based on their income or their revenue, and, send that money over to a school voucher program, which they get a tax credit or a tax write off for it. So that saves them money or saves them having to pay taxes. And so, it's one big cycle. It's like, okay, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. And it just continues. It starts out small, and then the more we work on it, the larger it gets. You mentioned the Step Up for Students here in the state of Florida. And Step Up for Students is a 501c3 nonprofit providing low income students, bullied students, and students with special needs with scholarships to help them pay tuition for private school assistance to attend an out of district public school or for tutoring, textbooks, or therapies. It was created as a part of a merger between Florida's two largest scholarship organizations, Florida Pride and Children First, which was founded by a Tampa businessman. And, he started this in 1998, 15,000 applications, 750 scholarships, and that has continued to grow. The scholarship was capped at 50 million in 2002 and '03, and was awarded to 15,000 students. So Step Up is another, entity in this whole process. They are kind of the liaison between the people with the money and the schools that they want that money to go to by vetting uh, the students who qualify for these vouchers. And also, it states that Step Up for Students is one of two nonprofits administering school choice scholarship programs here in the state and awarding their programs. So we have the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship, we have the Reading Scholarship, we have the Hope Scholarship, we have the Gardner Scholarship, and the last one, the Family Empowerment Scholarship, is a voucher program funded by the state legislature, and Step Up is contracted by the Florida Department of Education to process the applications. So, it's pieces. Here's a piece. Here's another piece. It's a three-pronged situation where you have one entity at the end, one entity at the beginning, and something in the middle, but they're all connected for the same purpose of finding these dollars and diverting them into these schools that are for-profit situations. And you might say, well, how does that profit this guy who started this? Well, I mean, if you've got $3 billion and your revenue is, 1.2 billion, and your income that you brought in was 300 million, that's a lot of profit margin. And that's what these people are doing. And that's what's going on here in the state with the governor and him passing this bill HB 745 to provide educational choices to families who might otherwise struggle to pay private school tuition. And when you delve into that, it's like, okay, so look at the numbers of who those parents are, who those families are, and look at how that's being basically used.
Mhm. And so it talked about the bill that Governor DeSantis signed, which was the HB 7045. It says will help provide educational choices to families who might otherwise struggle to pay private school tuition. And as you pointed out, for those people who are not in nowhere near poverty level, They are the first ones to get their children applications in, because as we discovered during the pandemic that most of our children did not have adequate internet. So a lot of these things are done during, over the applications are completed over the internet. So if they don't have access to internet and now the parents have to find time to get them to a library to get these things done for them, the applicant rate for the children that really needs this, that goes down significantly. And yet, it says this bill passed by the Republican controlled legislature is a large step in more than 2 decades of efforts by GOP leaders to offer vouchers to students. So, and it said, among other, the bill increases an income threshold to 375% of the federal poverty level, meaning that a family of four making nearly $100,000 a year could qualify for these vouchers. So when you put the numbers in as far as exactly what does that mean to a poverty level household, I just want you to really just delve into that, because I want people to really understand the last 5 minutes that we have, what that actually means and how it is hurting those households.
Well, you just read that a family of four making nearly $100,000 a year would qualify for vouchers. When you think about a family of four making six figures, and most of the time, families who are at the low income level, they are, many of them sometimes barely make $35,000 combined. So they need the vouchers, whereas a family of four, especially if you got a disparity in your children's ages, you may have one that's 10 and one that's 3. Well, there's a difference in age, so you don't need, all this money to send them to school. But six figures, making nearly six figures, you probably do have enough resources to help your child go to a private school. And we know that when this happens, you look at what schools they're going to and how they're providing the funding for that child to go to these schools. And one other thing that probably is not talked about in this whole scenario of thoughts that we deal with the vouchers and wanting to provide students opportunities and their parents to go to the school of their choice. That's the school choice part. Uh, Prestige is another part to this whole process. And if you want your child to go to that prestigious school that may cost, X amount of $1,000 per year to go there, and you feel they're going to not only get a better education, but it's going to give them a better opportunity once they finish to find a better job or uh, opportunity that will send them on a fast track to putting them in that six-figure income. Of course, that's what you do. And when we talk about low-income families, they don't have either the information to know about such things. They're just trying to get their children educated. So when you talk about politicians wanting monies to be diverted to their constituents or people who believe in what they believe in, it really does create some hardships for those people who really need it. And when such things are taken away, public schools, uh, you know, take a hit, and they can't keep taking this hit. Otherwise, the whole school or educational system will be privately built or privately structured, and then you got a whole different problem because now folks, you know, get caught up in looking at the money aspect. So that's my thought about that.
And this also affects the transportation industry as well, that are taking children to school, within that public school sector.
Right.
Um,
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. So, this is where we are. And, I see that our time is up. So I'm going to close us out, Ronline, and thank you again for being here today to provide us with your insight. I am Earl Kitchings, the host of the Kitchings Table, and every Tuesday morning right here on WBIS 106.9 FM, join us for the Kitchings Table, where we want to provide you with information and knowledge about things going on in your world or in your surrounding communities. Until next week, Ronline, have a great week.
all right. Thank you so much and enjoy your day.
All righty. Take care, everybody.